be screwed. Feel my own adrenaline, yeah, I do just what I do, and I hope you let me in, yeah.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the fourth part of What If Issei, Rias Find Harry Potter. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of Gabriel Herrol on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. My family found out rather early on that wizarding magic cause a glitch, so to speak, into a ward or barrier casted by a devil or an angel, fallen or not. Well, we're not sure about the angels from heaven since we didn't meet any, but in theory a wizard could escape a holy barrier as long as he's not possessed by something foul. They don't register our presence, so we are free of their influence. Asia then piped up. I remember one day at the church I grew up in, a group of oddly dressed people appeared out of thin air and subdued a troublemaker who was using wand magic to make some bad redecoration. The troublemaker in question was painting the walls puke green and writing obscene words all over the place, and also he was breaking the holy relics. The magical policemen subdued him after a short fight, put everything back to normal with a few swish of their wands, and after modifying everybody's memories except me and the priest in charge of the church, they left as if they never were there at the first place. Harry was a bit surprised that the Aurors didn't modify Asia's memories, but then remembered that each country had different laws, be they magical or mundane. He knew for a fact that in Italy, it was forbidden by law to modify the memories of young children under the age of 12. Rias and Aquino were very interested by those tidbits of information, being spellcasters type fighters themselves. It could give them an advantage during a fight or something. So Asia was not a stranger to magic. It explained why she took the evil peace system so well. Rias then answered, "The town is warded, Harry. I can use my teleportation circle to move around the town or to and from the underworld, but I can't physically leave Kyo Town without a chaperone authorized by either my parents or my brother." Sona never said anything, but I think she is also in the same boat as me. At first my brother had posted guards, but I could always lose them after a while. So he wised up and put barriers strong enough that my peerage and I put together can't overwhelm. Believe me, we tried very hard, but we failed. She finished with a sour tone, and everyone, except Issei and Asia, who were new additions to her family, nodded. Seriously, Rias hated being treated like a porcelain doll. It was one of the main reasons why she came to live in the human world with her friends. She was no longer a little girl. She was now 18 years old and an adult in the eye of the law in many countries around the globe and in the underworld. But as a pillar family heiress, her family saw fit to put her on a shelf to be admired but not touched. She was not a fucking porcelain doll. She was a living being with emotions, dreams, ambitions, and hopes of her own. Then her father just had to sign that damned marriage contract with Riser Phoenix. She would sooner commit Jigai ritualistic suicide for women consisting of cutting open their throat with a dirk. Before agreeing to marry that womanizing leech, it felt like she couldn't live her own life. Someone was always there, holding her hand and giving her orders. She calmed herself before she risked losing control of her power of destruction in her high emotional state. Harry hummed at that, lost in his thoughts, not aware of where Ria's own were going. So if Rias and her peerage weren't able to overpower the wards, he would have to try another way, since they had likely been conceived to tank an extreme amount of power. While he knew he was quite strong for his age, he knew he was nowhere near the level of one of the four great Satans. No, brute force would not win them the fight this time around. There was more than one way to skin a cat, though, as the saying goes. He already had a few ideas he could try. Coming back to the present, he asked, "So, what are we waiting for? Do we work on the town's wards right away or what?" In the end, it was decided that Rias and her peerage would follow Harry to the closest exit from the town's territory. Everyone followed by flying to exercise their wings, the more experimented members of the peerage guiding Issei and Asia along, except Aquino, who decided to ride behind her boyfriend. She loved to tease him by pressing her considerable assets against his back, and riding on a motorcycle was always fun. After about 15 minutes of flying gliding, they all arrived at destination. Since the wards were not meant to keep Harry and those without Ria's sigil out of the town, she had to demonstrate how she was literally penned in. No matter how high she flew, or even try to go underground, she had no way out. Each time she or one of her peerage members were trying to leave the official boundary of the town, a blood-red barrier with the sigil of Mao Lucifer would appear to block them. Harry hummed pensively and asked, "Can somebody keep touching the barrier, please? Also, don't forget to not let the mundanes see us, or we will have to deal with the Japanese Ministry of Magic. Trust me, you don't want to deal with the headache of the multiples jurisdiction. I need to cast some detection and revealing spells on the active barrier to learn more about it before making a decision on how to handle it." Aquino volunteered Issei for the task since he was looking bored with the technical talk. So the brown-haired boy was now lounging against the barrier like he would be lounging against a brick wall or something similar, while Yuyudo took care of making sure that the humans couldn't see them. Kaneko, Asia, Rias and Aquino were now sitting on the grass between the sidewalk and the road, watching the wizard casting detection and revealing spells after revealing and detection spells, looking at some numbers that no one else could make head or tail of since they didn't have a solid grounding into arithmancy. Harry kept doing this for 10 minutes before stopping, thus permitting Issei to stop making contact with the barrier, said barrier vanishing into thin air as soon as the Red Dragon Emperor was not making contact with it. Once they were both back with the group, Harry shared his findings with a grim look on his face with everyone. "Your older brother, Rias, is a fool. He clearly is a talented jack of all trades, no doubts about that, but he's clearly not a ward master. Your brother should have put someone officially qualified in charge of the wards he wanted to put around the town instead of doing it himself and botching the job. He basically put what could be antic and crude, but overpowered to the extreme prison wards all around the town. Also without a devil from Sona's peerage or Sona herself. I can't determine if the wards will stop her. It's not the nature of the wards that concern me. Mr. Lucifer really thought about any way a devil from your peerage or yourself could leave without authorization and made it impossible for all of you to do so by your own means. It's how they are powered that bothers me. He somehow managed to tie them to the collective life force of the local human populace." Long explanation cut short. If the wards are not completely brought down, or at the very least adjusted soon, like in about 3 months, give or take a few days, slowly but surely the human population will wither away and die away before their time by aging at an increased pace. The more someone is fighting the wards, the more life force is drained from the humans to power them. Rias, the life force sucked into those melons, is what caused the astronomically reduced birth rate in Kuo Town since they were brought up. That was the bad news. Now for the better news is that while I can't safely bring them down right now, I can acquire the necessary material to dismantle them completely. It should take a week or 2 at most, since many things needed are not produced in Japan, so I will have to order them from overseas. Bringing down the wards will alert your brother since he is the one who made them, and he will surely send someone to scope the situation, or he will maybe make the trip personally. I can't say for sure. But it is your duty as one of the 2 who govern the town to see to its citizens' well-being and security from the supernatural, so you have to act very soon. Now for the good news is that there are absolutely no trackers of any kind tied to the wards. So if you were to acquire a magical mean of transport that is not of devil origins, you could leave Kuo Town without alerting your family. More clearly, I could apparate with you to Kyoto and back, and nobody would be the wiser. I could also create a portkey to transport your whole peerage and nobody would detect it." Seeing their expression at the strange words, he explained. Apparition is the name of the wizarding ability to teleport. A portkey is an object enchanted to instantly bring anyone touching it to a specific location. Most of the time, a portkey is an everyday object that would not draw the attention of a mundane, like a broken clock or an old sock. So what's the verdict? Do you want to take a decision right now, or should you talk about this with Sona first? Rias was completely out of her element. First of all, her new friend decided to hold his part of the bargain they only just struck right away. She was elated that he might be able to do something with his different skills. Then she felt her good mood evaporate. In his haste to keep her safe, her idiot brother miscast the wards due to inexperience or maybe sheer idiocy, and put the human population of her territory in danger. Then she felt her good mood came back somewhat. Harry could deal with the problem, but not immediately since he lacked the tools for safe ward breaking. Then, hope and elation came to the front. He could help her leave the town and nobody would be the wiser. Finally, she could have some much-needed freedom. Don't get her wrong, she loved Quo Town, truly, but she wanted to see what the world had to offer before being shackled to her responsibilities as Lady Grimmary. Then she had to smother her impulse to go and hug him and also put her serious face back on. The wards were a problem, but could she make the decision alone, or would it be better to talk to Sona first? After a minute or two of introspection, she decided to send notice to Sona and to take the decision. After sending her familiar with a message, she said, "Yes, you have my permission to work on bringing them down. But do you have alternatives? Even if I was basically a prisoner, if the town was protected correctly, it would increase the security. We would have to go further to deal with Stray's devils, but they tend to appear at the most random places anyway." Harry blinked and said while rubbing his hand into his hair the same way his father did when he was nervous. For that I would have to outsource. I'm pretty good for breaking down wards, but beyond basic non-permanent wards, I'm not good enough yet to erect some. Sorry." Aquino and Rias smiled at his actions. It was sometime hard to remember that even with his odd and somewhat exotic talents compared to them, he was not proficient in every little thing like a centuries-old devil, fallen or angel. After that little excitement, the night was rather calm. Rias couldn't just go gallivanting in Tokyo on the drop of the hat since everybody had school on the morrow, but everyone was anticipating a weekend-long trip to Tokyo. Even Harry, since Aquino dangled in front of his nose a big reward should he not complain while shopping with the girls. "We will give you, Issei and Kiba, a nice fashion show in sexy underwear, and if you are good, I'll wear only those new sexy underthings for a makeout session and a private show. Who knows? Maybe I will lose the top if you're a good boy." She murmured sexily in his ear with a devilish smile and a twinkle in her eyes. Needless to say, Harry was sold very quickly to the idea. He might not be interested emotionally in Asia, who was too naive of the real world for his tastes, and Kaneko, who was way too stiff and emotionally repressed, but he was a heterosexual teenager male, so seeing a bunch of pretty girls parading in sexy underwear would always interest him. Rias was also quite the beauty, so after a good night kiss, Aquino and the rest of the peerage teleported back to the clubroom in case someone was summoned, and Harry decided to head home to order the tools needed for ward breaking. He did make a pit stop at the gas station to refuel his bike though. All in all, it was a productive night. He just couldn't wait for the weekend to be there. The day after the pact was made official, the devils of the school knew that Harry had found new ideas of pranks that would work on the supernatural students. Genturu Saji, the closet pervert of the student council and Sona's pawn, had opened his big mouth, using his status as a member of the much-respected student council to lecture the Potter heir on what was appropriate and respectable for Quo Academy. Notably, the younger boy tried to make the older one give up his habit of showing up every morning to school on his prized motorcycle, stealing the ladies' attention from him, and then went in a long diatribe about Potter's supposed wrongs. Needless to say, Harry ignored him altogether, and a few hours later, the annoying Vritra sacred gear user was found peeping on the female kendo club with the other two-thirds of the perverted trio and beaten black and blue with them once caught by their righteous feminine fury-enhanced shinais. Saji, once recovered, would deny categorically and repeatedly having been peeping willingly, but he would not be believed by any member of the female student body. It was a sad time for the wielder of Vritra's absorption line when even his female teammates among the student council were giving him the cold shoulder for his actions. Harry would later tell to the very much amused occult research club members that while a devil could generally resist a compulsion if Hesh was compelled to do something they really didn't want to do, like when he gave an example by casting the spell on Kiba with his permission and tried to compel him to sing a popular and particularly girly song that was aired recently on the radio and the knight refused categorically. On the other end of the spectrum, though, it was all too easy to make them succumb to their desires and do something rash if the desire in question was already strong enough naturally. Saji had wanted to see some real oppi for quite some time when the compulsion took hold, more than likely Sona's. So all Harry had to do was to nudge him towards the favorite haunts of the perverted trio, since the Citri heiress wasn't about to put out, as the saying goes, for her pawn's enjoyment, and the young man obviously knew it. So he took the consolation prize, so to speak. Issei really got a kick to see the regular beating he would usually receive occur from an outside perspective for once, since this time he was completely innocent and also had an ironclad alibi. It was a good payback since both Maruhama and Matsuda were spreading vile rumors that he was doing depraved things to Asia against her, well, since she was living with him and his parents. While there had been much cuddling without many clothes frequently, mainly in nightwear, and one or two accidental unclothed meetings between their rooms and the bathroom, they hadn't gone further than a few shy kisses and experimental gropes on the outside of their clothes yet. Asia was still somewhat unsure of herself and coming to terms with the fact that as a devil, she was somewhat expected to be a bit selfish, and that obeying her physical urges was normal and not a sin. And for all his perversion, Issei wasn't the type of man to force a girl to do things they weren't ready for. But Issei's punishment did come for him no matter what, even if it wasn't sure if he really expected it or not after seeing what happened to his two friends. After all, when humiliated, a marauder will always prank you back. It seemed that bad luck was shadowing the poor second year everywhere he was going. Anything that could go wrong was now going wrong with an extreme magnitude. The last man who was the victim of that curse was almost mauled by the chicken he was raising, if the records about the dire misfortune curse were right. What was great about that spell was the fact that it wouldn't kill you, even if you would be begging for it at the end. A misstep in the staircase since someone collided with Issei by accident. He tumbled down from the top floor to the ground level, somehow hitting every step on his head in his mad descent. Thrice. Akino was practicing new and dangerous spells found in some obscure grimoire. They were attracted to the Red Dragon Emperor like an iron bar and a magnet were attracted together even if she was aiming elsewhere. There was a silver lining though. He was getting really better at dodging under fire. Now he could successfully dodge 3 spells in a series of 5 if they weren't of the high-speed type. Quite a few times he was beaten black and blue for supposedly peeping on girls that were changing while he was just passing through and for once not peeping at all. He had to thank his new devil body's resilience, since usually such beatings would have put him out of commission for a good while before his resurrection. He also had problems with his school assignments. Many times they fell victim to nature's caprices, like localized rain and hail showers by example. One day, the 5th consecutive one into his incredible bad luck-filled days, he felt that the world was truly out to get him. His luck wasn't that bad usually. Was she bipolar? Yes. Vengeful like a woman scorned? No. On this 5th day of massive bad luck, he was walking alone towards his home after school let out for the day, minding his own business and not looking for any sort of trouble when he decided to cut into a deserted alley to take a shortcut since his mother had told him this morning that she would be cooking his favorite meal tonight as a reward for the good grades he had gotten before his string of bad luck-filled days. Then, as things were prompt to do this week, it could only got worse. A fallen angel free fell from the sky into said no longer deserted alley, only to open his multiple pairs of wings at the last moment to land safely. This one, contrary to Rainier and her subordinates who only had 1 pair each, had 3 pairs visible behind his back. Thus in total this fallen angel had 6 wings. The strangest thing though, was that the guy didn't try to kill him right away and didn't use any light spears. The fallen took out of his brown and tattered trench coat a regular, human-made and modified with a gun silencer, silvery gray Colt M1911, and then he pointed it toward the young devil's head and barked at him once he removed the safety. It's a hold-up. The money or your life. Be quick about it. Issei, who just had gotten his bi-weekly allowance the day before from his dad, was internally crying. He had been really anticipating being finally able to update his Pawn Movies collection and porn magazines. Needless to say, not knowing if his devil constitution would be able to tank a regular bullet in the head or anywhere else vital, and not wanting to give the fallen angel a reason to use light weaponry. Issei forked over his cash, only to be blindsided when his mugger closed his wings on himself once he had the money and disappeared into a storm of black feathers, letting the pistol clatter to the ground, cackling something about a 1-bet and a Spanish woman named Marina who now owed him a strip-tease and a blowjob. That tidbit of information got him even deeper into his funk, Even a fallen angel mugger was getting luckier with the ladies than him. It's not fair, it's just not fair. I'm stuck with the same porn material since last year. My imagination needs something new. If only I could see Buchu or Akino senpai's oppies. But no, that Potter bastard just had to put privacy spells on the shower area of the clubhouse and blind me every time the girls walk about almost naked. Issei's ranting to himself continued all the way to his home. He would have likely continued ranting, but he came to a stop in the empty driveway only to realize that his mother was not at home. His father was still at work at this hour, and he had somehow forgot his house key in the house this morning before leaving for school, and his cell phone had been confiscated earlier today. QO Academy's policy about electronic devices confiscated from the students was to hold up to them for 2 whole weeks before giving them back to their owners unless the parents or the legal guardian of the student came after class to reclaim the device for a first offense. So he wouldn't be getting it back before the punishment was over, since his parents had already seriously warned him recently against fooling in class with his cell phone. Life for one Hayadu Issei was indeed quite hard these days. Asia was given her own house key on her second day in the Hayadu residence, but she had stayed behind in school for some more tutelage in written Japanese. While being a reincarnated devil gave them the ability to speak and understand any known language on Earth like a native, the skill did not apply to the texts to read or the homework to write. Asia's first language was Italian, and since she was a former nun, she was also well versed in Latin. It gave her an easier understanding of Potter's Latin-based wizarding spells. Remembering about Potter's magic, had he not been told by Buchu that now as a devil he could now access to magic in general? Remembering the spell the older boy had used to sneak break into the deserted student council room to lace compulsions spells on Saji's possessions littering his desk. This one was a joint prank since even Kiba joined in with them, seeing as Saji had tried to get him in trouble one too many times for something he didn't do, and it also doubled as a male bonding activity. Issei jumped on his feet since he had been sitting on the doorstep while moping, put the hand that wasn't bound to the boosted gear on the lock, and bringing all his will to bear, he said, "Alohomora." While Issei celebrated internally his first successful attempt at spell casting, the door unlocked but shot open forcefully, rebounding on the nearest wall, and then hitting him straight in the face on the return trip, the doorknob somehow finding his unprotected stomach. Yep, his bad luck was holding still. There was a new problem though, that Issei discovered after he was done rolling on the grass with pain. It was that somehow the door locked itself again, since the locking mechanism from the inside on this particular knob was a button to push. He was back to his starting point. His right eye started twitching in irritation when he heard a deep rumbling chuckle into his mind. Great, just great, peaky even. Even Ddraig was finding his misery amusing. Issei's misery and extreme bad luck continued for another 4 days before it tapered off and everything eventually went back to normal. Well, as normal as a teenager turned devil in a peerage can be. He was making progress in his new job. He had managed to make a few contracts. There was some irony though. He could now use the summoning circle. But arriving to his summoner's home on his bike was his trademark by now, and it was gaining him some decent recognition, so he kept at it. Even better, he was getting in better shape physically. Now he wasn't cursed with such extreme bad luck anymore, but while his relationship with Asia was progressing slowly but surely, he admitted to himself that he was somewhat greedy by still desiring other girls. Not that he was seriously considering making a go at it with the girls of the club, since while Ria's Buchu was nice and really pretty, she was only using her charms on him for motivation since that was the stimuli he was answering the most to. And also while Akino-senpai was always kind and considerate and also generally helpful when she was not teasing him, even he could see that she was falling in love a little more every day with Potter, and the bastard was also quite evidently smitten with her. Stumbling upon them making out heavily on one of the couch in the deserted clubroom, while Buchu was away on a request was a big giveaway. The moan Akino-senpai let out when Potter took full hold with both hands of her delicious plump derriere was enough to make him bleed from his nose. Kaneko was very cute, there was no doubt about that, but while she wasn't as cold with him as she was before, she wasn't considering him for boyfriend material. He wasn't even sure if she was looking for someone. She was younger than him. Maybe she just wasn't ready for stuff like that. Tonight though, they were going back to the town's limits to assist at the breaking of the wards. Potter had finally gotten hold of the needed materials to do it safely, and in Issei's mind, it was high time. He had remarked that his parents' health had started to decline recently, and it was making him feel very bad to see them like that while he was still fully healthy and gaining more vitality as the days were passing. After a rather pleasant flight, unassisted this time since he had gained enough experience to fly on his own, they were at destination. They had chosen this Thursday since tomorrow, Friday, and this coming Monday, school wouldn't be in session, so they could all disappear to Tokyo for a 4-day weekend tomorrow morning. Since Buchu's elder brother was supposedly away for business for at least another week and a half and wouldn't find out about the wards coming down before his return, for which the whole occult research club would be back from their outing with nobody none the wiser, except his parents. But it's not like his parents, ordinary humans, could call the Devil King or Buchu's parents and rat them out. Kaichu and her peerage wouldn't rat them out either, since the wards had also kept them penned in Kuo Town. To always have someone to look after the town, it was decided that both peerages wouldn't leave the town at the same time, just in case there was a problem. So the next weekend would be the student council's turn to go on a short vacation while the occult research club would be on duty. Potter had also somehow found out that the wards weren't physically tied to the head honcho, but to some sort of monitor that was likely easily overlooked somewhere in his office, he could guess. Back to the present, when asked how he would shatter the whole ward scheme by attacking only one side, Potter answered to Buchu. "Your older brother really made a big mess here, Rias. The wards are only grossly overpowered. If they were not so much charged and based on an ancient schema for a magical medieval dungeon, they would likely have fallen on their own by now. It's almost a miracle from the Allfather himself that Mr. Lucifer managed to bring them up in the first place. I don't know how to explain it better since I don't know how he did it. But now, shush, let me work." With that, Harry stole a quick kiss from Akino's lips and patted Rias on the head mockingly, ignoring her annoyed glare with a prankster smirk on his face, then went to work. What the Gremory heiress didn't know and would only realize tonight when she disrobed to go to bed was that he had changed the colors of her underwear from the nice but plain white they were to a pink-colored childish set with characters from My Little Pony on them, since he had patted her head with the hand that had his ring focus. Harry could use magic from both hands, but he was right-handed. Thus he tended to use that hand more than the other. Back to the action. He planted into the gravel and sand a few lockpicks look-alike made of bronze on both sides of the road and then did something astonishing. From his non-ringed hand, a ball of emerald green fire came to life and grew to the size of a basketball before he launched it on the now active barrier. Issei was snapped out of his awe by the voice of Akino, who after a loud surprised gasp, said with a confused voice, "Dragon fire? But—" Harry answered absent-mindedly while watching the supernatural fire and the magical barrier interact and fight each other's for supremacy. "I have a rather strong draconic sacred gear. Understatement of the century. Snort. My devil powers are based on 2 of the 5 primary elements, wind and fire respectively. My draconic partner has overridden my devil-natured fire once I awakened my sacred gear willingly for the first time and changed it into dragon fire, but didn't touch my devil-natured wind. I don't use my gear very much or very often since my partner asked me to get my own skill set up to snuff and to not overly rely on his powers in case we faced off against someone who can shut down sacred gear's users." It was a little white lie mixed with some truth, but Harry wasn't ready to tell the whole club that he was in fact the White Dragon Emperor, and that it was the main reason why he declined to join Ria's peerage. Albion was way too much amused by the fact that D-Drag hadn't picked up his presence yet to reveal the charade. Akino would learn about it very soon if he had anything to say about it. It wasn't healthy to keep secrets like that in a serious relationship. He was still keeping his animagus form to himself until he had the right occasion to use it, though it would be quite interesting to see his friend's reaction. A marauder had to keep some aces to himself after all. Back to the ward breaking, when the barrier's red magical energy had evenly mixed with the green of the dragon fire. Harry, leaving a bunch of off-balance teenage devils to their own thoughts, went to work on the next part of the ward breaking. It was siphoning the magic away from the barrier to send it back into the ley lines of the earth. With a gesture of his glowing with magic ringed hand, the lockpicks look-alike all started to glow from an internal light. Little by little, The magic that made the interior of the barrier seemed to thin itself further and further in the form of glowing quite thick emerald green chains with a glowing red-colored core that were absorbed into the lockpicks look-alike, until the barrier was entirely transparent. Then the wall, once he had become totally transparent, seemed to fold on itself like how a carpet would be rolled when you bought it in stores. With a sound similar of a porcelain dish breaking on solid ground, the wards were now officially down. Now, for the cleanup and removing the remaining structures to prevent someone knowledgeable to just erect them back again. Once it was done, Rias and her peerage took their first step into liberty by moving outside of the official boundary of the town. It was not much different than on the other side, but for most of them, it was symbolic. Freedom, sweet, oh so sweet and beautiful freedom. While the orc was enjoying their moment, Harry was cleaning up, recuperating his ward-breaking material and putting them back into a nondescript traveling satchel. Once done, he tapped it lightly with his index and murmured the word, Portus. Then the bag started to quiver in place and to glow an intense but rather odd blue light. After it stopped quivering, it disappeared into an untraceable vortex a few seconds later. There, now his ward-breaker kit would be safe and well stored for future uses. It would more than likely be useful for future incursions into Sona's domain, since after the boys' collective prank on Saji, the Citri heiress had warded extensively the student council room and promised great pain and horrible humiliation as retribution to the next supernatural offender who broke in. Of course, Harry took her words as a challenge, and he was always up for a good one. Maybe next time he could plant some gay pawn magazines in her desk, but he would have to find the right pasty for the task of obtaining them. No way in hell would he be caught dead or alive with such material. Maybe that weird perverted girl who was making advances on him during his first week here in QO would be willing to help. Harry was removed from his mischief planning by an excited Rias who catapulted herself into his arms, hugging him for all he was worth. Surprised and caught off guard, he could do nothing but hold her, while she was thanking him repeatedly. Taking the time to look towards his girlfriend to see if he was in trouble, he could see in her violet eyes that she was amused at his discomfort and bore him no ill will. So now knowing he wouldn't be in trouble and have his boyfriend privileges taken away, they weren't living together, so she couldn't make him sleep on the couch when he will invariably do something stupid to the point of angering her yet. He returned Ria's hug and said with sincerity in his voice and a small smile, "You're welcome, Rias." Well, once the surprise had passed, he was oddly comfortable with the hug. It had nothing to do with her curvaceous form pressed on his frame though, no, not at all. Once business was concluded and Rias released her queen's boyfriend. Said queen went to take his hand and drag him to his bike to have him drive them to her shrine for some alone time. Once arrived at destination, and with a subtle use of magic to shrink the machine, since Harry refused to leave his toy parked downstairs and she refused that he forcefully climb the stairs on his vehicle, Akino gave a nice tour of the grounds to her companion. It was lovely, but there were obvious signs of neglect and of the ravages of time. Clearly she tried to do her best, but she was only one person. Add to that her human and devil studies and her queen responsibilities, she just didn't have enough time. Wanting to help and also maybe win a few brownies points with his girlfriend, Harry started to cast quite a few reparo spells. It was a basic spell, but like always, he tended to overpower them, thus repairing about anything and everything around the affected area of the spell like it was brand new. The young woman who liked to dress as a shrine maiden was surprised out of her mind. Honestly, she should really learn to expect the unexpected with her life as a reincarnated devil and being around Harry Potter. With a few casual flicks of his wrist and a truckload of power, her man had given back her shrine its formal glory. She couldn't help but to say out loud, "Wow, devil magic can do something similar, but only teams specially trained for restoration can do such feats, and they are usually employed to wipe clean the battlefields and to restore anything destroyed to not arouse the humans' suspicions. They are also very expensive, so it's not everyone can afford them. And you just did all the hard work with your different magic. You could put them out of business, I think." Harry shrugged his shoulders and answered, "Many wizards and witches become lazy later on. Why do stuff manually when you can accomplish so much more and quicker with the wave of a wand and a verbal command in Pig Latin? Charms, a branch of wizarding magic, are made for almost any situation. The mending charm is a basic one taught to first-year students, but as you can see, the more power you add and/or the more you master it, the more the results can vary. I can't repair a mountain that was blown up or restore a whole stadium by myself or anything like that though. Wizarding magic has limits, and I also have limits like anyone, so I think that your specialists won't be out of job for the big cases. They kept wandering around the shrine, Akino telling interesting little stories about some building or some about her customers coming around during school breaks. Being into a peerage gave them a nice paycheck. They were servants, not slaves after all. But being raised into the Shinto faith and having worked as an exorcist due to her life's circumstances before becoming Ria's queen, she was the ideal person to take over this abandoned Shinto shrine. The devils and the Shinto pantheon had no real bad blood between them. It was the three factions of Christianity that were on a very shaky and paper-thin truce with each other's. It was better than nothing though. Even this state of unrest was better than all-out war. After their nice stroll, Akino decided it was time for a change of venue. Her man had been honest and open with her, and it was now time that she returned the favor. Their make-out sessions were becoming heavier and heavier as time was passing. It was becoming extremely hard for both of them to stop before the point of no return. They were now at the point where anything could send them over the edge and straight to a full sexual encounter if they weren't careful. She had been right about her thoughts when they first gotten together. Second base was just heavy enough to make them able to wait for more. But now, she wasn't even sure if she would be able to stop the next time they let their passions runs out. Hell, she was even less certain if she would stop him the next time he tried to push aside a bit of her bra for a better access to her tender flesh. Her will and resolution were fading, and she knew it was the same for him. She wanted him, and he wanted her, badly. Once they were in the house, she guided him to the living room and made him sit on the couch, while she said to him, "I'll be right back. I just have to go slip into something more comfortable. Then we have to talk about something important. Before you jump to the conclusions like you are prone to. No, I don't want to break up or anything like that. There are some things about my past that I need to tell you." She gave him a chaste and quick kiss on the lips before turning around in direction of her bedroom, and knowing what he was looking at, Akino made sure to put some extra sway in the rolling of her hips, knowing and loving the effect she had on him. Hearing him groan out loud made her put a big proud smile on her pretty face. It was so fun to mess with him like that, and there were some times where he would turn the tables on her and leave her all hot and bothered just before class or before she was needed elsewhere. The cheeky bastard. She then disappeared into her bedroom, closing the door behind her. Once she came out, she was wearing the garb of a Miko. She then sat near her boyfriend and curled herself into his arms. With a solemn voice, she then started to explain her past. How she was born from the union of Hagrid, a Miko, and Baraquil, one of the leaders of the Grigori, the organization that Azazel had created with the others who had fallen with him, thousands of years ago. When she came to the tale of how her mother met her end in front of her own eyes by her father's enemies, Harry hugged her fiercely, letting her know non-verbally that he was with her. All the while one hand was making a constant circle motion on her back, while his free hand was caressing her long hair. "It's why I hate him and the fallen angels with all my heart. He wasn't here to protect us in our time of need, and his enemies took their grievances on my mother because they weren't strong enough to fight him. I hate the fact that I'm half fallen, that his cursed blood runs into my veins. I absolutely loathe the fact that if I hadn't run when I had the chance, I would have met the same fate as my mother." She also resumed over her life on the streets, until she was saved in extremis by the Gremory clan, since her mother's family had managed to corner her and her granduncle was centimeters away from sending her to her next great adventure. She was very glad for his presence. He was making her feel worthy, cherished, and so loved. But she had come so far, she would take the tale to the end. She would show him everything. While his thoughts went south pretty quick when she started to undo her kimono, they never reached the gutter since she exposed her wings. The right one was the wing of a devil, leathery and bat-like, but the left one was the wing of a fallen angel, bird-like with black feathers. Head bowed in shame, she waited for the accusations to fall, only to be surprised when delicate fingers raised her head by her chin, her teary violet eyes meeting the young man's emerald green. What she saw was a look of acceptance, curiosity, and could she dare hope, love? Then he grabbed her by the waist somewhat forcefully, The act gave her pleasant shivers. Akino absolutely loved how possessive he was of her in private. Before Harry forcefully sat her on his lap, where her man took the chance to put both of his arms around her waist once she was settled. He put a soothing kiss on her forehead and then delicately chased her tears with his thumbs before saying, "You're not the first fallen angel hybrid I've met, my darling. I'm not sure if you knew about it since it's neither common knowledge nor really a secret of state either. But all around the world, the fallen angels who refused to keep fighting and/or were tired of war integrated themselves the best they could into the various wizarding communities, since they were basically now homeless. No longer welcome in places of cult and unwelcome into the underworld also. Well, except in the United Kingdom and all of Ireland, since the Celt gods doesn't like the three factions at all. If they find a member of one of the three factions staying in their territory more than a few months, they usually send Cernunos as a trash man. Trust me when I say that this god is thorough at his appointed task. I have two friendly acquaintances that were born half human, half fallen, like you were before Rias reincarnated you as a devil. Daphne and her younger sister Astoria Greengrass and their parents were originally living in Ireland. But with the Celt pantheon threatening to exterminate them if they didn't get out of their territory pronto, the Greengrass family moved to France since the Celts lost their spiritual claim to that country long ago. Well, that's what I've been taught. In your case, your father is a high-ranking fallen angel. In theirs, it's their mother. I'm not sure of her rank though, she never spoke about that during our visits. So, why would I be ashamed of what you are? I was born a half-devil. It would be really hypocritical of me to shun you for how you were born. It's not like you had the choice in your circumstances of birth, honey." He finished with a smile and willing to make her smile too, or to make her be in a better mood. He then started to kiss softly and nip at her exposed collarbone since she hadn't put her kimono back after exposing her wings, now retracted. It had the effect of taking her mind off her bad memories, since she blushed immediately and let out a throaty moan of ecstasy all the while closing her eyes. She didn't really care though. She had exposed her most guarded secrets to him, and he was still there. He still wanted her. After a few more kisses, he took the parole. "Since it's the evening of secret telling, I better put the rest of them on the table also. I have a condition though. Don't tell anything to Rias just yet, please. When I will know her better, I will tell her myself." Akino was pouting because their playtime was interrupted before it really began, but she guessed she could be patient for a little bit. After all, he would be staying the night with her, so she could take a few minutes to hear him out. Seeing that he was waiting for her answer, she then said with a pouting voice, "Fine, but don't take too much time, okay? Rias is not only my king, she's my best friend too. I hate having to hide anything to her." Harry acquiesced easily to that point with a movement of the head, and then started to explain. "First of all, the principal reason of why I declined to become part of Ria's peerage is that I'm the White Dragon Emperor. Hakuryuku, I think, is the proper title of Albion in Japanese. I'm in the possession of the Longinus class Sacred Gear Divine Dividing. While I do respect Issei's drive to fight for his dreams and the care he has towards his teammates, I can only stand so much of his blatant perversion per day. As to why you never picked up anything definite from me, Albion was helping me conceal him to prank D-Drag, since the Red One never noticed us." Harry didn't need to explain the ancient and bitter rivalry of the two heavenly dragons. It was a well-known subject among the three factions. "As for my exact ancestry, my mother is the only survivor of a branch of the Phoenix clan who established themselves in the human world a few decades ago. From what we learned from Kisher Zelrek Schweinorg, a dead apostle ancestor, basically a super vampire and a top-ranked magus, the Celt pantheon took serious offense that a devil family established themselves into their territory without their permission, and eventually, they sent Cernunos to kill them all. We don't know why, but while he killed all the adults, he left my mother, who was a baby at the time, alive, healthy, and unharmed. Maybe it was because she was conceived and born into the human world. We can only speculate. That's what we managed to piece together. I'm not about to try and find the horned god to ask for his motivations on that fateful day. Not even the master of the kaleidoscope will go bother the gods too much without a good escape plan. From what we could find out, he locked away my mother's true nature as a pureblood devil, and left her as a mortal magical human and set it so her true powers and nature would come out when she would be 20 years old. He used his powers to enter her into the British mundane foster system and left her at an orphanage to be adopted. Fast forward around 20 years later, the mundane-born prodigal witch named Lily Evans Potter had her devil powers and nature unbound and was happily married with a pure-blood wizard from an old family, James Charles Potter, my father. They had a son, their firstborn, me, who inherited of his fair share of both races. Thus I'm half Fenix on my mother's side. Albion felt that my devil fire was too weak for his tastes, so he changed it to dragon fire as you saw tonight during the ward breaking. My human blood does work against me somewhat though. While I heal quite fast and I'm very resilient even by regular devil standards, I do not possess the Fenix immortality, and neither the ability of the Fenix tears. Well, that's about every secret I can think about right now, unless you want in on my still forming plans for a good prank on Sona and the one I played on Rias earlier. He finished with his marauder grin. He didn't mention his family's encounters with Voldemort or the fact that his father was his mother's queen. It wasn't relevant to the conversation and the Dark Lord wasn't their problem anymore. Last he heard from the supernatural grapevine, the thanatophobic megalomaniac was wanted by Hela, who took serious offense of being cheated of her due, since the Dork Lord had the sheer gall to split his soul after he made a deal with her for more power. So the Norse goddess of the dead had put a very high bounty on his head. Everyone with some sense into their head could tell you that reneging on your end of a deal with a deity is really bad for the health. It seemed that Riddle thought he could get away with it. If the Norse goddess of death had a more definite trait than anything else, it was patience. She was immortal after all. She would get her due one way or another. Harry knew that goddess very well, but it was another tale for another time. Aquino started to giggle despite herself. His roguish grin when he was preparing a prank was something else. It never failed to make her smile and laugh. She burrowed herself against his side and was quite happy that he took a more possessive hold around her waist by bringing her closer to him while she was now digesting his story. It was a bit surreal, but she was living in a world of gods, Buddhas, angels, fallen angels, devils and dragons, and a multitude of others supernatural races. So her beau's story was not so far-fetched. She would normally have asked him to show her divine dividing, having only seen it in a book once, but she was too comfy to move away from him. She knew that this sacred gear manifested itself as a pair of dragon wings, so to activate it he would have to get up, which was something she didn't really wanted at the moment. Then something else filtered through her brain. He had said that he had recent Fenix ancestry. Rias was contracted to marry the third son of the main Fenix clan, Razor. The guy was a total womanizer who only wanted her best friend for the prestige of having the Gremory heiress as his bride. But as a low-class devil, Aquino couldn't do anything about it directly. But would Harry being willing or able to help? Yes, she was pretty certain he would help. He was the sort of person who was selfless with his true friends. But was she prepared for the consequences that could befall them should she seek his help? Aquino resolved herself to handle the fallout. She was willing to make some sacrifices to help her very best friend and king out of the situation she was in. Then, as she was about to explain everything to her boyfriend, he said 3 little words that changed dramatically the path of her thoughts. "I love you, my Aquino." It was not the first time he told her that, but each time he told her that he loved her, her heart skipped a few beats and butterflies would flock into her stomach. She was quick to seal her lips to his for a passionate French kiss, trying to kiss him in submission. But Harry was not a man easily brought to submission. He fought back, groaning with pleasure since his lady friend decided to tease him by rubbing herself against him. They finally released their kiss to breathe, and when the young man went straight to second base by infiltrating a hand inside the loose kimono of his lady love, taking hold in his palm of her left melon, his thumb teasing her nipple, she immediately reacted. Her moan of pleasure cut through the silence of the living room. Her bosom was very sensitive. It was then and there that Aquino decided that she could no longer be a good girl. She wanted him far too much, and by the feeling of the bulge in his jeans that was poking her, they were both on the same page. She removed his hand from her melons to loop her arms around his neck once again, and she said to him with a seductive and needy voice, "I can't wait anymore, love. I'm a bad girl. Take me to bed. Make love to me. Please, my Harry." Needless to say, Harry couldn't resist the clear invitation with that tone of voice, and with their hormones running rampant and nothing else to deter them, He wasn't in the mood to be a good boy either. So with a lewd grin, he took his beauty into his arms, then got up from his seat, making her let out a squeak of surprise. Her man was physically stronger than he appeared. She would have thought that with his build, he would have been more speed-oriented. A love bite at the junction of her neck and her right shoulder made her forget everything unimportant for the moment with another moan. She guided her soon-to-be lover towards her bedroom and let out a squawk when he literally threw her on the futon. Soon enough, their clothing were removed piece by piece until both were in their birthday suit admiring each other's. Harry's prior experiences showed when he did his best to prepare her for what was to come. Akino had multiple orgasms due to the oral treatment her boyfriend gave her. He was patient with her, teaching her how to please him with her hands and orally also. When he could no longer take it, she was somehow both fascinated and touched by his rule of safety first and foremost, my sweet. Now let's get to the main event, shall we? While she wasn't experimented in the art of lovemaking, she had been taught everything relevant to the subject along with the other female members of Ria's peerage, said king also included when they hit puberty by Lady Gramarye. Venelana Sama had never touched the subject of human-made contraceptives though. Understandable, as she was a pure-blood devil with rather limited contact with the mortals. Akino's boyfriend, on the other hand, swore by it. Something about the wizarding contraceptive spell and potions not working properly on other non-human supernatural beings and not wanting to be a father so soon. She was iffy on the details. You can't really memorize things like that when the cheeky half-devil made her see whole constellations while playing with her womanhood with his habile fingers, so forgive her less than stellar memory recall. Even knowing in advance that the first time for a girl hurt, Akino was still caught off guard by the intensity of the pain when he deflowered and entered her. Their first round of lovemaking was somewhat awkward, uncomfortable and messy, but she wouldn't change it for anything in the world. It was the real deal and nothing like those pawn movies that Issei swore was his video version of the Bible. Harry did his very best to make sure she enjoyed their moment to the fullest, and even if she didn't orgasm during the intercourse, those orgasms preceding it more than repaid the less pleasurable session. In the end, they went 3 rounds counting their first, before calling it a night. She was exhausted and quite sore but happy and sated, while Harry had one more round in him. He was all out of condoms and refused to take a chance by having unprotected sex. It was not the fear of catching STD, but Harry didn't want to create a new life by accident, no matter the fact that devils had low birth rate. Harry Potter would not challenge Murphy's Law if he could help it. He would also need to stop by the pharmacy to buy some more preservatives, since Akino and he had planned to share the same hotel room in their weekend expedition to Tokyo. Now that they were officially sexually active, they didn't see reason to deprive themselves of such a pleasurable activity. Usually a girl would be too sensitive to jump back to sex so soon after her first time. But magic do make wonders, and she knew some healing spells that would work like a charm. Tomorrow though, now it was time to sleep. The next day, after fooling together into the shower and a healthy breakfast, the couple took the road towards the academy. The plan was to assemble into the clubroom and from there, Harry would create a portkey after shrinking everyone's baggage for the weekend. They would land in the magical section of the capital, and from there they would check in at their hotel before going wherever they wanted. Harry did make his pit stop at the pharmacy for more contraceptives beforehand, so once arrived at destination, it was to be welcomed by an irritated Rias who wanted to give Harry a piece of her mind for his immature prank of last night. That action was derailed when the Gramarye heiress saw that her best friend was glowing. The redhead was a sharp one. It took her only 1 minute to connect the dots as to why her queen was so radiant and so affectionate, more than her habit, towards her man. The slight limp she was showing was the last clue needed. It was not her reaction who garnered everyone's attention though, it was the normally stoic Kaneko who let out a totally out-of-character high-pitched girlish squeal with a big smile and rushed toward her upperclassmen. With her enhanced senses, she must have smelled something new about Akino's scent. Rias and Asia, who also connected the dots after Kaneko's outburst, both squealed in the same girlish manner and babbling too fast for any male to understand them. They managed to forcefully wrestle a totally dumbfounded Akino away from her lover towards Ria's bedroom for an emergency girl gossip session. Once the males heard the door close after one last girlish squeal, they all trembled with fear collectively. Girl talk was evil. That was creepy. Way too creepy. It was Kiba who broke the silence and asked hesitantly. Could you explain what happened, Harry-senpai? Issei, as confused and clueless as Yuyudo, also nodded his head. He too wanted to understand what the hell happened to the girls. Harry let out a sigh before passing his hand across his hair. Well, the cat was out of the bag anyway. Akino and I took our relationship to the next level. We made love last night. Kaneko is some kind of cat yokai, I think, so she must have smelled the difference in Akino and my scent. That's my theory anyway. Once he was done answering, both Yuyudo and Issei stayed quiet. That is until Ria's knight did something that seemed out of character for him. He approached the Potter heir and gave him a powerful slap in the back, and with an amused grin, he said, "Well done, stud. Who knew that all it was taking was a British man to tame our ultimate sadist?" He finished, laughing, all the while Issei went fetal into a corner, crying about the injustice of the world. That boy always over-dramatized everything. He must have been a child or a legacy of Apollo in another life. The girls stayed firmly locked into Ria's room for over an hour. They would have likely stayed there longer if not for Kiba, who lost a game of rock, paper, scissors to decide who will brave the forbidden territory. Went to remind them that they had a weekend to Tokyo scheduled. Harry dutifully shrank every piece of luggage for every orc member before letting them handle their own shrank possessions. He then conjured a red hula hoop and instructed, "Everyone grab a side on the hoop with at least one hand. Take hold firmly and don't worry, once the portkey activates, you won't be able to let go. You will feel at the activation like a hook grabbed you behind your navel. When we arrive at destination, keep moving your legs like you are still walking, or else you will land flat on your stomach or on your back. It's not a pleasant feeling, trust me on that. Everyone got everything. We aren't coming back until Monday evening, so if you forgot something, well tough. You will have to make do." Once everyone assured him that they had everything needed, Harry enchanted the hula hoop. Portus. Everybody was fascinated to some degree to see the foreign magic in action. Once the enchantment was set, Harry made a verbal countdown. 5 seconds till departure. 4, 3, 2, 1, activate. The sensation of a hook grabbing you by your navel was felt by everybody, and then in an invisible vortex, the occult research clubroom was deserted. It was like nobody had been here in the first place. Tokyo, here they come. The occult research club and Harry Potter in tow came out of the ether, still tethered to the portkey. Soon enough, they landed more or less smoothly at the arrival point. Kaneko, as a cat, landed on her feet easily. Rias, who had a ballet phase when she was little and had kept the balance and the grace, also managed to land on her feet. Kiba had to take a knee to the ground since his head was spinning. Akino would have fallen if not for her man's arm shooting around her waist, keeping her upright. Of course, Harry had also managed to land on his feet, but he had stumbled a little before grabbing his girlfriend. Poor Issei though, he forgot the instructions and thus landed face first on the ground. To add insult to injury, poor accident-prone Asia somehow managed to land after everybody else by crashing on Issei's back, making the Red Dragon Emperor kiss the floor, much to the amusement of everybody. Heck, even Albion and Ddrag were laughing at him. Not that Issei knew that the Vanishing Dragon was laughing at him or actually existed, but it was still a fact. After poking some fun at Issei, who finally saw one good thing of his ill-timed landing, what with Asia initiating her first public kiss on his lips to comfort him, they were now en route towards their hotel, leaving the Porky and Apparition Point. Rias and Harry had split the cost of the rooms 50-50, and the latter had handled the reservations in a hotel in the magical district. That way they could use their powers all they wanted, within reason of course, and nobody would bat an eye since it would be an establishment which the customers were mainly magicals or regular humans in the know. Harry had booked them into a middle-class establishment, which was a true novelty for the Gremory heiress and the former nun. The former had been all but choked in luxury all her life, and the latter had lived a godly life before her excommunication. At the reception desk, the half-devil took the reins so to speak and went to get their keys and their room numbers. Issei and Kiba would share a room with 2 double beds. Asia, Kaneko and Rias would also share the same type of room, but since there wasn't a room with 3 double beds, one of the 3 would have to make do by sharing one of the 2 beds with someone, while Akino and Harry needed only one room for them with only 1 double bed. Their room was right next to the others, but Harry could cast top-grade silencing charms in a flash to not disturb the rest of the customers, since they both had the intention to sleep in the same bed together and have sex again. Why would they deny themselves some great fun now that they had started? Well, it was not only about the sex, to be frank. They loved each other's genuinely, so they took care to show it to their respective other in a physical way. Once Harry had all the key cards, he distributed them to the others while pocketing his and said, "Okay, there's one key card for each of you. Do not lose it or it's a 700 yens fine per lost card. I am not paying for your blunders, so if you lose it, you will pay the fine from your own pocket. Breakfast here is served from 6 in the morning to 9. Lunch is from 11 to 1 in the afternoon and dinner will be served from 4 in the afternoon up to 7 in the evening. If you wish to eat a full meal outside of those hours, well, there are a few restaurants nearby. They do offer some room service here, but there's more choice in the dining room since there's always a buffet ready. So what do you say we put our things in our rooms and go out to do the tourist thing? We can be sure to always have something to do around here. I intend to really enjoy my 4 days weekend." When they all agreed, they took off in direction of their rooms. Being bored and wanting to spice things up just for the hell of it, Harry casted silently the general counter spell on Kaneko, thus cancelling her human disguise. It didn't take long for the petite white-haired girl to find out what he did, and with a venomous glare at his snickering, she made sure to hide her Nekashu features again while snubbing him. During his minor prank, Akino was giggling, Rias was shaking her head back and forth with exasperation, and Kiba along with Issei were both rolling their eyes at his childish prank. All the while Asia was interested in seeing more wizarding magic in effect. Once everyone found their rooms, they went to enter, only for Rias to stay outside a moment longer, thus letting Kaneko, who had reapplied her disguise, and Asia take the lead. The Gremory heiress really looked at her best friend and the newest addition to her small circle of close friends interaction, and she found that she was actually envious once she had taken the time to really analyze her feelings. Envious that her dear friend Akino had found someone dear to her heart, while she was stuck in that damnable marriage contract with that disgusting leech called Riser Phoenix. Don't get her wrong, it was not the harem that was turning her off from Razor. Her dad had one, and she had gotten to know a few of his mistresses. It was his attitude and the way he looked at her that was making her feel violated. While she was not blind and knew far too well that Harry's eyes were often glued to her ass and hips when she was walking ahead of him, she knew he was able to resist the temptation to do more than look. Rias knew very well that she was a beautiful young woman and was quite adept at using it to her advantage without any remorse whatsoever. She was a devil after all. But she was not and would not be a home wrecker. While the Potter man was quite yummy and very desirable on many levels, she would never try to entice him to steal him away from Akino. Maybe if he was dating another girl she would try her hand at it, but she would never do that to her very best friend. Unless Akino was open to share, that is, shaking her head to chase those thoughts. She then entered the room that she would be sharing with her rook and bishop. They would have to wait for Harry to resize their stuff after all. The wizard didn't take long though. He had resized Akino's and his stuff first before going to the boys' room and doing the same. Now he was using his power like it was nothing, making the luggage take back its original size and weight. The girls were curious on how it was working. While all three of them had seen many magic users of different levels at work, the mystical arts were rarely used for things so mundane. It was Rias who asked the wizard, "How does it work? I mean, I understand the principle of it and what the spell does, but how can you manipulate the size and weight of the luggage without damaging them and what they contain?" Once Harry had finished resizing the last briefcase, he then turned his attention to Rias, blinked confusedly a moment or two, and then answered her frankly as was his habit. "I'm really not the right person to ask those questions to, Rias. I've never been a theory-oriented type of guy. Seriously, I almost failed some theory parts of my major magical exams when I took them. I'll read about the theory behind an interesting spell I wish to learn, and I had also to learn that stuff during my schooling. But only far enough to understand how to cast it at the maximum efficiency possible. If you want to discuss magical theory, I'll hook you up with my mom and my Uncle Remus at the next break. They are the scholars of the family and way better placed to answer your questions. I can loan you my magical school books in the meantime once we get back. Now if you want to learn how to cast powerful, flashy, and rather destructive spells, I'm the right guy to ask. If you want very delicate and overly precise spell work, you'll have to talk with my parents though. The Gremory heiress was a bit put out at hearing that, but she could somewhat understand his reasoning. Each person had strengths and weaknesses. Harry was strong in practice but weak in theory. After being shooed out so they could change in peace and dodging Kaniko's vengeful claws after he asked half-jokingly to stay in the room to watch the show, Harry went back to his room, snickering all the way. What the wizard saw when he entered the room he would share with his lady love set his blood on fire. His lovely Akino was bending at the waist facing away from him, rummaging into her briefcase set on the bed, muttering to herself. It truly was a great view. Not particularly caring about being subtle or being heard, he walked up to her and suddenly took full hold of one of her butt cheek before squeezing it hard. He knew that his sweet darling loved it somewhat rough. Her mixed moan of pleasure and yelp of surprise was like sweet music to his ears. She got up and was quick to jump on him to kiss him senseless as retribution. Harry wasn't complaining though, no not at all. They did stop before they could get carried away though. They had much to do today before they could have a repeat performance of yesterday night. After one last kiss, they went to join the others who had amassed in the hotel's lobby once Akino had changed from her school uniform. Harry hadn't needed to change since he was always quick to get rid of the damn thing when he was done with school. What followed next was a veritable whirlwind of activities, shopping sprees galore, and with a wizard nearby to shrink the purchases and to portkey them to the clubroom in QO, it was great. The men took some time to drool over new models of paintball guns, cars, new video games and motorcycles, much to the amusement of the present members of the Fairer Seg. They didn't protest though, since with 4 young women, the 3 young men were quickly turned into pack mules for the girls' purchases, even if Harry's magic tricks made it easily more bearable. They could easily afford to let them have their own moments in La La Land. It was a vacation for everybody after all. Asia was not a compulsive buyer by any means, but Akino, Kaniko and Rias had convinced her to buy a few nice things for herself, like a few stuffed toys to decorate her room with and a few new pairs of shoes. Why women needed so many different pairs was still an unresolved mystery of the universe in the mind of the men present. Issei needed only his regular shoes and the ones requested for the school uniform. It was the same for Kiba. Harry hadn't even bothered with the dress shoes, his sneakers were enough. He wasn't a fan of dressing formally at all. Hell, as soon as his mother stopped going through his clothes regularly when he was old enough to clean up after himself, he had made sure to loose permanently all the ties and bow ties she had bought for him when he was younger. He hated them with a burning passion. They felt way too restrictive. If he could have gotten rid of all the pictures she took of him dressed like that, he would have too. But his mother was a very formidable witch. No matter that he had more raw power than everyone else in the family, she could still wipe the floor with him in a fair fight due to her sheer experience over him. After looking around the magical shopping district until supper time, it was a satisfied group of 7 friends who trekked back to their hotel. After a satisfying supper where everyone took at least 2 helpings, they were still growing. Each went to his own room. During the trek from the dining room to the rooms, Kiba asked Issei, "Hey Issei-kun, could you do me a little favor?" Intrigued, the Red Dragon Emperor answered positively. "Sure, why not? What do you need, man?" The blonde-haired boy then said with an amused smirk on his lips. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 5. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Gabriel Herrol on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.